A waitress loses everything for helping a stranger. Denzel Washington. The next day, an unexpected secret turns her life upside down. Now, she must decide. Run or face the danger closing in. Subscribe now so you don't miss this thrilling story. The rain drizzled over the city as Denzel Washington stepped quietly into the small diner on the corner. His eyes carried the weight of a man who had seen battles no one else knew. He sat at the counter, his hood still dripping, when a black waitress approached. Her name was Lisa. She had a kind smile, but her eyes held something deeper, an uncommon compassion. The diner was nearly empty, yet the air felt thick with tension. Lisa sensed that this man wasn't just another customer. There was something about him, an aura that made her pause, as if she was standing at the edge of a secret waiting to unfold. Denzel ordered a coffee. His voice was deep, yet calm, carrying stories untold. Lisa took his order, but before she could walk away, she noticed a group of men at the back of the diner staring at him. These weren't ordinary looks. They weren't watching out of curiosity, but with intent. Lisa felt a chill run down her spine. She knew trouble when she saw it, and something about this moment felt off. She kept moving between tables, always keeping one eye on Denzel. He didn't seem afraid or even concerned, just aware. When the men from the back stood up and started moving toward him, Lisa acted on instinct. In a quick motion, she pretended to trip, spilling some coffee onto a table, forcing them to stop. "Oh my God, I'm so sorry," she said, her voice filled with nervous laughter, buying just enough time for Denzel to catch on. He stood up calmly, placed some cash on the counter, and gave Lisa a small nod, a silent gesture of gratitude. But not everyone saw it that way. The manager, a middle-aged white man, stormed toward Lisa with a hard expression. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" he snapped. Lisa tried to explain, but he cut her off before she could finish. "This isn't the place for you to play hero. You're fired." A jolt of shock coursed through her body. "But I was just trying to help," she protested. The manager didn't care. His decision was final. Lisa stepped out into the damp night, her heart heavy. Helping someone shouldn't come at such a cost. But now she was unemployed, unsure of what to do next. Yet the universe has a way of returning what it takes. The next morning, as she got up, she noticed an envelope sliding under her tiny apartment door. Her hands trembled as she picked it up. Inside was a note with an address and a simple message. "Come, there's something you need to see." Her pulse quickened. Who had sent it? And more importantly, what was waiting for her at that address? One thing was certain. Losing her job wasn't the end. It was just the beginning. Lisa thought losing that job was the worst thing that could happen. But she had no idea what was coming next. The city hummed with life, but Lisa felt like a ghost walking through it. The streets were still damp from last night's rain, the neon lights flickering over puddles that reflected a world that didn't care about her struggles. Her apartment was a tiny box on the third floor of a rundown building, where the paint peeled off the walls and the sounds of distant arguments seeped through thin doors. It wasn't much, but it was hers. Until now. Without a job, how long could she afford to stay? She sat at her small kitchen table, staring at the mysterious note in her hands. Who had sent it? And why did it feel like an invitation to something bigger than herself? Lisa knew the address. It wasn't in the best part of town, but it wasn't the worst either. The kind of place where you kept your head down and minded your own business. As she walked, the city pulsed around her. Honking cars, the chatter of strangers, the distant sound of a street performer playing the saxophone. Every sound felt sharper today, as if the world was pushing her towards something she wasn't ready for. The tension from the diner still lingered in her chest. Was she really about to walk into another unknown situation? The address led her to a sleek modern building that stood in stark contrast to the worn-out streets surrounding it. It looked expensive, out of place. Lisa hesitated. What kind of place was this? She double-checked the note, her fingers gripping it tighter. This was the address. There was no mistake. Taking a deep breath, she pushed open the glass door and stepped inside. The air was cooler here, carrying the scent of polished wood and something faintly metallic. The lobby was nearly empty, except for one man sitting in the farthest corner, hidden in the shadows. Denzel Washington. Lisa's breath hitched. He was waiting for her. Not just waiting, expecting her. The realization sent a shiver down her spine. What was this place? And what did he want from her? She thought she was just a random waitress, someone who had helped a stranger in a moment of trouble. But as Denzel lifted his head, his gaze sharp and unwavering, Lisa felt the weight of something much larger settling over her. "Sit," he said simply, gesturing to the chair across from him. His voice was calm, but there was something unspoken behind it. Something heavy. Lisa hesitated but obeyed, her hands gripping her bag like a lifeline. "I owe you," Denzel continued. "But this isn't just about gratitude." He leaned in slightly, his expression unreadable. "You saw something last night, didn't you?" Lisa's stomach twisted. The men at the diner, their eyes, the way they moved. She had tried to ignore it, pretend it wasn't her problem. But now, looking into Denzel's intense stare, she knew she was already part of this, whether she liked it or not. Lisa could feel her pulse hammering in her ears. Sitting across from Denzel Washington in this sleek, unfamiliar space felt surreal. He wasn't just some stranger anymore. There was something in his presence. Something controlled, powerful, yet burdened. She had always thought of him as just another face in the crowd that night at the diner. But now, she realized, he was a man carrying secrets too heavy for most to bear. Denzel leaned forward slightly, his fingers tapping lightly against the polished wooden table between them. "Lisa, what you did last night, it wasn't just an act of kindness," he said, his voice calm yet firm. "You interrupted something you weren't supposed to see." His words sent a chill down her spine. She tried to swallow the fear rising in her throat. I was just trying to help," she stammered. He nodded slowly. "And because you did, your life changed." Lisa wanted to argue, to say that she wasn't part of any of this. But deep down, she knew the way those men had moved, the way they watched Denzel. She had felt it, the energy of something dangerous unfolding. Denzel exhaled, his expression unreadable. "I used to be in the kind of business where making enemies was easy. I left that life behind. Or at least, I thought I did." He paused, looking at her with an intensity that made her stomach tighten. "But some people don't forget. And now, you've been seen with me." Her hands clenched into fists in her lap. "So what? What does that mean for me?" she asked, her voice steadier than she expected. Denzel studied her for a moment before answering. "It means they're going to come looking for you." The words landed like a punch to the gut. Lisa's mind raced. This was insane. She was just a waitress, just a woman trying to get by. How had she been dragged into something so dangerous? Denzel must have seen the panic rising in her eyes because his voice softened. "I don't want anything to happen to you. That's why I called you here." He slid a small black envelope across the table. Lisa hesitated before picking it up. Inside, there was a single key. "You have two choices," he continued. "Walk away now and pretend none of this happened, or take that key and trust me to keep you safe." Lisa's heartbeat thundered in her chest. This was crazy, absolutely insane, but somehow she knew there was no walking away from this. Not really. If those men at the diner were as dangerous as Denzel made them out to be, then she was already on their radar. She looked down at the key in her hand, her breath shallow. This was it. A decision that would change everything. Lisa thought she had control over her life, but some choices can't be undone. Lisa's fingers tightened around the key as her mind spun with questions. She was just a waitress yesterday. Now she was sitting across from Denzel Washington, being told that dangerous people were after her. Every logical part of her brain screamed to run, to pretend none of this was real. But deep down, she knew the truth. The moment she helped Denzel in that diner, She had stepped into something far bigger than herself. There was no erasing that moment. Denzel watched her carefully, reading the hesitation in her eyes. "Fear is natural," he said, his voice steady. "But fear won't change what's already been set in motion." He leaned back in his chair, his gaze never leaving hers. "They saw you help me. That means in their eyes you chose a side." Lisa's breath hitched. Chose a side? She never meant to choose anything. She was just doing what was right. But now, right and wrong didn't seem so simple. The air between them grew heavier, the silence thick with unspoken consequences. Lisa glanced at the key again. "Where does this go?" she asked, her voice quieter than before. Denzel didn't answer immediately. Instead, he reached into his jacket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. He slid it across the table. Lisa hesitated before opening it. It was a photograph, grainy, black, and white. Her stomach twisted as she recognized one of the men from the diner, the one whose eyes had lingered on Denzel with something dark, something lethal. "His name is Victor Marquez," Denzel said, his tone dropping lower. "And if he's involved, this is bigger than I thought." Lisa's hands trembled slightly as she set the picture down. "Who is he?" she whispered. Denzel's jaw tightened. "The kind of man who doesn't let loose ends walk away." The word sank into Lisa like ice. Loose ends. That's what she was now. A problem, a witness, a target. A sudden noise outside made Lisa jump. A car door slamming. She turned her head toward the glass doors of the building. A black SUV had parked across the street. Tinted windows. Engine still running. Something about it made her stomach clench. Denzel saw it too. His body tensed, his eyes narrowing. "It's time to go," he said, his voice firm. "Now." Lisa didn't argue. She grabbed the key and followed him, her pulse hammering in her ears. They moved quickly, stepping out a side exit into a narrow alley. The city noise felt different now, sharper, like a warning. Lisa's hands were clammy as she tried to keep up with Denzel's pace. "Where are we going?" she asked. Denzel didn't slow down. "Somewhere safe. But first, you need to understand something," he said, glancing back at her. "This won't end until we make it end." Lisa felt a cold wave of reality wash over her. There was no going back to normal, no returning to her quiet life. She was in this now, whether she wanted to be or not. And as the sound of distant footsteps echoed behind them, one thing became clear. She was running out of time. Lisa thought she was just running for safety. She didn't realize she was running straight into the fire. Lisa's breath came in shallow gasps as she followed Denzel through the maze of alleyways. Every shadow felt like a threat. Every sound made her skin prickle. She was in over her head. Just 24 hours ago, she was serving coffee and wiping down counters. Now she was running for her life alongside a man whose past was a mystery and whose presence felt like the only thing keeping her alive. They finally stopped in front of an old brick building, its windows dark and empty. Denzel pulled out a different key, smaller than the one he had given her, and pushed open a heavy steel door. "Inside," he said. Lisa hesitated for only a second before stepping in. The place was bare, with only a few chairs, a desk, and a large map on the wall. Red circles marked several locations. She didn't need to be a detective to know this was serious. "What is this place?" she asked. Denzel locked the door behind them before turning to face her. "A safe house," he said simply, but there was more to it. Lisa could feel it. "Whose safe house?" she pressed. Denzel exhaled, running a hand over his face. "Mine, from a long time ago." His voice carried something heavy, something unfinished. Lisa's stomach tightened. "Who are you, Denzel?" The room felt too small, too charged with something unspoken. For a long moment, he didn't answer. Then, finally, he said, "I used to work for them. The people chasing us now." The words hit her like a shockwave. "What?" Her voice was barely above a whisper. Denzel nodded. I was part of an organization that did things I'm not proud of. But I got out. At least, I thought I did. Lisa's heart pounded. This wasn't just about her helping a stranger. She had stepped into the past of a man who had once lived in the shadows. She tried to process the weight of his confession. And now they want you dead, she said, more as a realization than a question. Denzel's expression darkened. Not just me. You too. Lisa's chest tightened. But why? I don't know anything. Denzel took a step closer. You saw me. You helped me. That's enough for them. The finality in his voice sent a shiver through her. There was no reasoning with people like this. Lisa gripped the key in her hand, suddenly understanding that it wasn't just a key. It was a choice. What do I do? She asked, her voice steadier than she expected. Denzel studied her for a moment before answering. You decide if you want to survive, or if you want to fight back. The weight of his words settled into her bones. She had spent her whole life surviving. Maybe it was time to do something more. Lisa thought she had no control, but sometimes survival means becoming something you never imagined. Lisa sat in the dimly lit safe house, her mind a storm of emotions. Fear, anger, confusion. They all swirled inside her, fighting for control. She had spent her whole life playing by the rules, keeping her head down, working hard. And yet, here she was, marked as a target for simply helping a man in need. Life wasn't fair, but she already knew that. What she didn't know was what kind of person she was when pushed to the edge. Denzel watched her carefully, recognizing the battle happening inside her. He had seen this moment before, in himself, in others who had been thrown into impossible situations. Fear is natural, he said, his voice steady. But fear doesn't get to decide who you are. You do. His words settled deep in her chest. Lisa had always let life happen to her. Maybe it was time to start happening to life instead. She tightened her grip on the key. Tell me what this unlocks, she said. Her voice was no longer shaking. Denzel nodded approvingly. A storage unit. Inside is everything we need to fight back. Evidence, money, weapons. Lisa inhaled sharply. Weapons? The idea of picking up a gun, of stepping into a fight she never asked for made her stomach twist. But then she thought of Victor Marquez, of the way he looked at Denzel, of the way he would look at her if he found her. Denzel softened slightly, sensing her hesitation. You don't have to become like them, he said, but you do have to stop thinking like the person you were yesterday. Lisa met his gaze, searching for any doubt in his words. There was none. He truly believed she could do this. The question was, did she? She had spent her whole life working for scraps, ignored, overlooked. Maybe it was time to be seen. Maybe it was time to stop running. She let out a slow breath. Okay, she said. I'm in. Denzel's lips curled slightly, the closest thing to a smile she had seen from him. Good, because they won't stop coming. And we don't just survive this. We end it. The weight of those words settled over her. But instead of fear, she felt something new. Purpose. Lisa had never held power before, never had the chance to truly change the direction of her life. But now, standing in the middle of a storm she never asked for, she realized something important. She wasn't powerless anymore. She was ready. The storage unit smelled of dust and oil, the scent of metal and secrets lingering in the air. Lisa stood frozen as Denzel pulled out a black duffel bag, unzipping it to reveal stacks of cash, a thick envelope labeled Marquez, and a handgun wrapped in cloth. This is everything, he muttered, sifting through the contents. Lisa's heart pounded. This was no longer about survival. This was war. Denzel turned to her, his expression unreadable. We hit him tonight. The words landed like a hammer in Lisa's chest. Tonight? She echoed, disbelief flashing across her face. She had imagined time to process, time to plan. But Denzel knew better. Marquez won't wait. He already knows you're involved. If we don't move first, he will. His voice was calm, but Lisa saw it in his eyes. The urgency, the danger. Lisa exhaled sharply, forcing herself to push past the fear. Then tell me the plan. Denzel studied her for a moment before nodding. We bait him. Marquez runs his operations out of an old nightclub downtown. He thinks he's untouchable there. He slid the envelope toward her. Inside this is everything we need to expose him. Wire transfers, names, proof. We set up a meeting under the guise of a deal. Once he's there, we end it. Lisa swallowed hard, her fingers gripping the envelope. And by end it, you mean? She didn't finish the sentence. She didn't need to. Denzel's silence was answer enough. Her stomach tightened. What if we just give this to the cops? She asked, knowing the answer before he even spoke. Marquez owns the cops, Denzel said, his voice low. If we hand this over, it disappears. And then so do we. A weight settled over her. There was no easy way out of this. Lisa had always believed in doing the right thing. But what happened when the right thing wasn't enough? What happened when justice wasn't an option? She looked at Denzel, really looked at him. He wasn't a killer. He was a man who had been pushed too far, just like her. Maybe the only way to survive people like Marquez was to make sure they didn't walk away. She took a deep breath and squared her shoulders. All right, she said, voice steady. Let's finish this. Denzel's expression softened slightly, a flicker of approval passing through his eyes. Then, let's go. He zipped the duffel bag shut, handed her a second key, and led the way out. Lisa followed without hesitation. For the first time in her life, she wasn't afraid. She was ready. The nightclub pulsed with low, ominous bass, its neon lights flickering like a dying heartbeat. Lisa walked in beside Denzel, her fingers clenched around the small recorder hidden in her pocket. Across the room, Victor Marquez lounged in a private booth, his expensive suit crisp, his confidence unwavering. He had no idea his empire was about to crumble. Marquez's eyes locked onto Lisa, a slow smirk creeping across his face. Well, well, the little waitress who caused so much trouble, he drawled. Lisa swallowed down the fear clawing at her chest. I'm here to make things right, she said, sliding the envelope onto the table. Marquez chuckled, taking a slow sip of his drink before nodding to one of his men to pick it up. Smart girl, he murmured. You finally understand how the world works. Denzel, standing just behind Lisa, tensed. He knew Marquez too well. This wouldn't end with a simple exchange. No, check it, Marquez ordered, and the thug flipped through the documents, nodding in approval. But then, Marquez's expression darkened. Something doesn't feel right, he muttered, eyes narrowing. He leaned forward, his gaze sharp. You think I don't know a setup when I see one? Lisa's breath hitched. But before she could react, Marquez's men drew their weapons. The nightclub's shadows swallowed the panic, the music masking the chaos. You were never walking out of here, Marquez sneered, pulling his own gun. But he never got the chance to fire. Denzel moved first, his years of experience kicking in as he disarmed the nearest guard and turned the weapon against him. Lisa dropped to the floor as shots erupted, glass shattering, and people screaming as they fled. Marquez scrambled back, rage flashing across his face as he aimed at Lisa. Her hands trembled, but she didn't hesitate. She grabbed the fallen gun at her feet and pulled the trigger. The shot rang out, echoing in the chaos. Marquez staggered, his eyes wide with disbelief before he collapsed. Silence fell. Lisa's heart pounded. She had done it. She had survived. Denzel helped her to her feet, his eyes filled with something she couldn't quite name. Pride, maybe. It's over, he said. Lisa let out a shaky breath. Not yet, she whispered, pulling out the recorder. The entire conversation had been recorded. The evidence was undeniable. Marquez's empire would burn, and she would make sure the world saw it happen. She wasn't just a waitress anymore. She was something more. Lisa walked into that nightclub as the woman she used to be. She walked out as someone else entirely. The sun was just beginning to rise as Lisa and Denzel stood on the rooftop of a nearby building, watching as the city below stirred to life. It felt surreal. Just hours ago, they had faced death, and now the world moved on as if nothing had happened. But Lisa knew everything had changed. She had changed. She turned to Denzel, who leaned against the railing, silent, thoughtful. "Do you ever wonder if we did the right thing?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Denzel exhaled slowly, his gaze fixed on the horizon. "The right thing," he repeated. "Lisa, the world doesn't give people like us the luxury of easy choices. We do what we must to survive. And sometimes, survival is the right thing." Lisa absorbed his words, feeling their weight. She had spent her life believing in fairness, in justice, but she had learned the hard way that justice didn't always come from the law. Sometimes, it had to be taken into your own hands. She reached into her pocket, fingers brushing against the small recorder, the evidence that would take down what was left of Marquez's empire. She had a choice to make. She could expose everything, hand it over to the press, let the world see the corruption festering beneath the city's surface. Or she could walk away, start fresh, leave it all behind. The decision loomed over her, heavy and uncertain. But then, she saw her reflection in the building's glass, saw the woman she had become, strong, unbreakable. She knew what she had to do. Lisa met Denzel's gaze and smiled. "We don't just survive," she said firmly. "We fight. We change things." And with that, she pulled out her phone and made the call. Within hours, the story would be everywhere. The truth would no longer be buried. Marquez's allies would fall, and the city would finally see what had been hiding in the shadows. Lisa wasn't just a waitress anymore. She was a force. Denzel chuckled, shaking his head. "You remind me of someone I used to be," he said, "before the world tried to break me." Lisa nudged him playfully. "Guess it didn't do a very good job." Denzel smirked. "No, I suppose it didn't." They stood there for a moment longer, two survivors looking out at a world that had tried to crush them, but failed.